Hello students. I have often wondered that in a country like India, where goddesses are worshipped across the length and the breadth of the country, why should women have such a subjugated position? Clearly, there is need for affirmative action in favor of women to restore them to the position of dignity and pride which they must occupy at par with men. But before that, it is important to understand what is exactly affirmative action. Affirmative action is a policy in which an individual's color, race, sex, religion or national origin are taken into account to increase opportunities provided to an unrepresented part of society. Affirmation action policies in India are operative in three main spheres, mainly appointment and promotion in government services, admission to public education institutions, and seats in the legislature. The purpose of affirmative action is to establish fair access to employment opportunities, to create a workforce that reflect the demography of the qualified available workforce in the relevant job market. In case of women, affirmative action policies and programs are tools whereby additional efforts are made to recruit, hire and promote qualified women, minorities and individuals with disabilities. Affirmative action has been at the heart of public policies aimed at uplift of the socially disadvantaged in India. Affirmative action incorporates some features from two distinct British concepts of positive discrimination and positive action. It is a set of policies that support members of disadvantaged groups that may have suffered discrimination in the past in areas like education, employment or housing. So why is there need for affirmative action for women in India? Among the disadvantaged segments of the people in a country like India, where patriarchy has been long entrenched, the most disadvantaged group is constituted by women. They suffer from all sorts of social, economic and political marginalization. They face challenges almost throughout their lives right from their birth, and in such a situation, the need for affirmative action can hardly be exaggerated. In fact, discrimination against women and girls has been and continues to be a pervasive feature of Indian society at almost every level. India's progress towards gender equality, measured by its position on rankings such as the Gender Development Index, has been rather disappointing despite fairly rapid rates of economic growth that have been achieved subsequent to the liberalization age. So what are the disadvantages that women face in India? In the past, while the Indian GDP has grown by around 6%, there has been a perceptible decline in female labour force participation from 34 to 27%. The male-female wage gap has been stagnant at 50%. Crimes against women show an upward trend, in particular brutal crimes such as rapes, dowry deaths and honour killings are heard off and on. These trends are quite disturbing. It seems reasonable to infer that the economic growth that is visible in India is not accompanied by advancement in education and certainly does not entail prosperity for all. Development clearly has not been inclusive. Adherence to traditional institutions and socially prescribed gender roles continue to hold women back. And we find in India the dominance and even continuance of several institutions that have survived through history. These cultural institutions, particularly those relating to patriarchy and patrilineality and patrilocality, play a central role in perpetuating gender inequality and fail to generate ideas about gender appropriate behavior. A culturally ingrained parental preference for sons emanating from their importance as caregivers for parents in old age is linked to poorer consequences for daughters. This is also reinforced by the dowry system, which, though officially abolished, continues to prevail at times in a veiled form. The dowry system, involving a cash or in-kind payment from the bride's family to the groom's at the time of marriage, is an institution that deters empowerment of women. And of course, in India, we find patriarchy quite entrenched. The prevalence of such practices creates a mindset among parents not to be desirous of girl children or to invest less in girls' health and education. Such parental preferences are reflected in increasingly masculine sex ratios in India. In 2011, there were 919 girls under age 6 per 1,000 boys, despite sex determination being outlawed in India. This reinforces the inferior status of Indian women and puts them at risk of violence in their marital households. That women in India have been subjugated through history is recognized by the Constitution. The preamble to the Constitution and in other provisions including fundamental rights, directive principles of state policy and even fundamental duties, we find an acceptance of this fact. The Constitution not only grants equality to women, but also empowers the state to adopt measures of positive discrimination in favor of women. Within the framework of a democratic polity, our laws, developmental policies, plans and programs have all aimed at women's advancement in different spheres. India has also ratified various international conventions and human rights instruments committed to secure equal rights of women. Key among them is the ratification of the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women in 1993. So there are various constitutional safeguards that we come across in India. Fundamental rights, among others, ensure equality before the law and equal protection of law, prohibits discrimination against any citizen on grounds of religion, race, sex, caste, sex or place of birth, and guarantees equality of opportunity to all citizens in matters relating to employment. We find this quite eloquently articulated in Articles 14, 15, 16, and even in directive principles like Articles 39, 39A, B, C, and 42 of the Constitution. There are also constitutional privileges, including equality before law for women, the state not to discriminate against any citizen on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them, the state to make any special provision in favor of women and children, and equality of opportunity for all citizens in matters relating to employment or appointment to any office under the state. Not only fundamental rights, but also the directive principles of state policy echo the reality of making affirmative action policies in favor of women. The state is to direct its policy towards securing for men and women equally the right to an adequate means of livelihood, to promote justice on a basis of equal opportunity, and to provide free legal aid by suitable legislation or scheme or in any other way to ensure that opportunities for securing justice are not denied to any citizen by reason of economic or other disabilities. And the state must also make provisions to secure just and humane conditions of work and for maternity relief. The state is to promote with special care the educational and economic interests of the weaker sections of the people, to promote them, among them social justice, and see to it that all forms of exploitation are eradicated. What is also important is that there are provisions for ensuring women's participation in India's scheme of decentralized governance. Not less than 1/3 of the members belonging to the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes of the total number of seats to be filled by direct election in every panchayat is to be reserved for women, and such seats are to be allotted by rotation to different constituencies in a panchayat. We also see the same thing reiterated in case of direct elections in every municipality. In addition to the constitutional provisions that we have seen, there are also legal safeguards for women. To uphold the constitutional mandate, the state has enacted various legislative measures intended to ensure equal rights to counter social discrimination and various forms of violence and atrocities, and to provide support services, especially to working women. There are broadly two categories of crimes against women. Number one, the crimes identified under the Indian Penal Code, which include rape, dowry deaths, homicide, and such acts, and the other pertains to crimes identified under the special laws. Although all laws are not gender specific, the provisions of law affecting women significantly have been reviewed periodically and amendments carried out to keep pace with the emerging requirements. So what are the special initiatives that we find in India that tries to address this position of women? First, you have the National Commission for Women. In January 1992, the government set up this statutory body with a specific mandate to study and monitor all matters relating to the constitutional and legal safeguards provided for women, review the existing legislation so as to be able to suggest necessary amendments. Second, there is the Scheme for Reservation for Women in Local Self-Government. The 73rd Amendment Constitutional Act, passed in 1992 by Parliament, ensures 1/3 of the total seats for women in all elected offices in local bodies, whether in rural areas or in urban areas. Third, the National Plan of Action for the Girl Child, 1991-2000. The plan of action is to ensure survival, protection, and development of the girl child, with the ultimate objective of building up a better future for the girl child. What is therefore the nature of the affirmative action for women in India? The problems and challenges faced by women are complex and multifarious. Hence, the nature of affirmative action for them has also been quite complex. Such affirmative actions are mainly twofold. Primarily, affirmative action for women consists of economic aspects such as health and education. At another level, affirmative action has also been envisaged for them in the realm of politics and public life. The impressive policy interventions that need mention include a policy experiment in village-level governance that mandated 1/3 representation for women in positions of local leadership has definitely shown promising results. Evaluations of this affirmative action policy have found that in villages led by women, the preferences of female residents are better represented, and the women are more confident in reporting crimes that earlier used to be covered up simply because they were considered much too stigmatizing. Female leaders also serve as role models and raise educational and career aspirations for adolescent girls and their parents. Behavioral studies find that while in the short run there is a backlash by men as traditional gender roles get challenged, the negative stereotype eventually disappears. This underscores the importance of sustained affirmative action as a way to reduce gender bias in society. Another important policy change with regard to affirmative action for women aims at equalizing land inheritance rights between sons and daughters. This, of course, has met with mixed responses. While on the one hand it led to an increase in educational attainment and age at marriage for daughters, on the other hand, it increased the scope for domestic violence. Improvements in labor market prospects have also the potential to empower women. An influential randomization study found that job recruiter visits to villages to provide information to young women led to positive effects on their labor market participation and enrollment in professional training. This has also led to an increase in age at marriage and childbearing, a drop in desired number of children, and an increase in school enrollment of younger girls not exposed to the program. Recent initiatives on training and recruiting young women from rural areas for factory-based jobs in cities provided economic independence and social autonomy. A necessary condition for women empowerment is, however, an attitudinal shift that needs to be in place together with all schemes geared towards women empowerment. And that is why it is emphasized that an attitudinal shift is a necessary concomitant for women to be considered as equal within their homes and in the broader society. Educating Indian children from an early age about the importance of gender equality could be a meaningful start in that direction. There are several schemes which have been flagged by the government with regard to affirmative action for women. These include the Beti Bachao Beti Padhao scheme, which is the decline in sex ratio, child sex ratio or CSR, is a major indicator of the need for empowerment of women. The CSR reflects both pre-birth discrimination manifested through gender-biased sex selection and post-birth discrimination against girls. Social construct discriminating against girls on the one hand, easy availability, affordability, and subsequent misuse of diagnostic tools on the other hand have been critical in increasing sex-selective elimination of girls, leading to low child sex ratio. This is the flagship scheme for prevention of deaths of girl child at the time of birth or even before birth. The Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana is a scheme that encourages parents to build a fund for the future education and marriage expenses for their female child. It helps change the mindset that a girl is a burden on the family. It makes parents and guardians aware of the benefits of planning ahead for the girl. Investment in the account can be claimed for tax deduction under Section 80C by the parents or guardians. This is therefore an innovative scheme. There are other schemes also, like the One Stop Center scheme. Gender-based violence is a global health, human rights and development issue that transcends geography, class, culture, age, race and religion and affects every community and country in every corner of the world. This scheme has been initiated to bring an end to gender-based violence in society. One-stop centers are intended to support women affected by violence in private and public spaces, within the family, community and the workplace. There is also the Women Healthline scheme. Ignorance and lack of sufficient awareness about government schemes to address the difficulties faced by women in society is a major impediment to gender equality in India. The scheme of a universal portal of Women Healthline is intended to provide 24 hours immediate and emergency response to women affected by violence through referral and information about women-related government schemes and programs across the country. There is also thought given to the difficulties faced by working women. So the Working Women Hostel scheme of the Government of India has been conscious and remains concerned about the difficulties faced by working women and introduced this scheme in 1972-73 for construction of new expansion of existing buildings for providing hostel facilities to working women in cities, smaller towns and also in rural areas where employment opportunities for women exist. The basic objective of the scheme is to promote safe and conveniently located accommodation for working women, including daycare facility for their children wherever possible. Capacity building of women is also an important focus of the government. The STEP or Support to Training and Employment Program for Women is basically a capacity building scheme and it is entirely centrally directed and implemented. The program strives to build upon the traditional knowledge of women and convert it into sustainable livelihood opportunities for women. STEP guidelines have been revised in 2014 and they try to ensure that the objectives of the scheme, namely to provide skills that give employability to women, get fulfilled. But women must also serve as agents of change. Mention may be made of the Mahila-e-Haat and the Mahila Shakti Kendras. This scheme will provide an interface for rural women to approach the government for availing their entitlements and for empowering them through awareness generation, training and capacity building. Student volunteers will encourage the spirit of voluntary community service and gender equality. These student volunteers will serve as agents of change and have a lasting impact on their communities and the nation. The Mahila Police Volunteers is also a scheme that deserves mention. Gender-based violence faced by women both in public and private spaces, including domestic violence, sexual assault, rape, etc., highlight the need for women empowerment. The broad mandate of the MPVs is to report incidents of violence against women such as domestic violence, child marriage, dowry harassment, and violence faced by women in public spaces. And of course, we all know about the Nirbhaya tragedy. So the Nirbhaya scheme is also a recent initiative of the government to combat abuse against women. The Nirbhaya Fund envisages the following features: direct impact on safety and security concerns of women, optimum use of existing infrastructure, innovative use of technology, no duplication of existing government schemes or programs, provision for real-time intervention as far as possible. For example, in the case of CCTVs for women's safety, there should be real-time monitoring of footage and quick response rather than just a recording of events for evidence after the incident has occurred. There ought to be strict privacy and confidentiality of women's identity and information. Indeed, there have been paradoxical developments with respect to affirmative action for women. Over the years, we are witness to several paradoxical developments in respect to the position of women in Indian society. While there is increased awareness and consciousness of women's rights, there has also been an increase in reporting of various acts of violence and crime on women, including rape, trafficking, and dowry. There has taken place an expansion of work opportunities for women, but at the same time, women continue to have a weak bargaining power in the labor market. While there has been an increasing number of educated, aspiring career women entering the workplace, large sections of women continue to operate in the low-paid informal sector. Similarly, feminization of agriculture and growing numbers of women farmers has brought the larger issues of gender entitlements to land and assets ownership to the forefront. In conclusion, it is therefore clear that the issue of women empowerment as a socio-political ideal must be envisaged in the wider context of women's rights in India. It is a process that leads women to realize their full potential, their rights to have access to opportunities, resources, and choices with the freedom to make decisions at home and outside. Empowerment of women can only happen when advancement in the conditions of women is accompanied by their ability to influence the direction of social change gained through equal opportunities in economic, social, and the political spheres. So the whole issue of restoring women to the pride of place and dignity in society must verge on the acceptance of women's rights and entitlements. In recognizing the need for these rights for women, one must understand that these are their entitlements. They are not to be extended in a tone of charity. That alone will make reality the importance of women in our society. Thank you.